All right. Hi, guys. My name is Kavish Senthilkumar, and I'm here to talk about your personality around others. So one day I was just chilling. I was relaxing. I was doing pretty much nothing at my house. I just had a conversation with my sister. Then my sister and her little middle school friends came in, and she started talking to them. And I was sitting on the couch, and I sat there, and I asked myself, how does my sister act so differently when her friends are around and when she's talking to me? How did she change her personality? Is the sister I see the sister that's actually her? And how does she change herself so quickly? I kept asking the question, how do people act the way they do? And I felt like I wanted to address this in the TED Talk. So again, while sitting there on the couch and looking out the window, I asked myself, how do people see me? Oftentimes I ask myself how I look to other people, not as a matter of insecurity, but as a matter of curiosity. And I asked myself, is the way I see myself different from the way other people see me? And how do I come off to other people? So I wanted to look at this idea in the TED Talk by asking how people's selves correspond to the way they act, how people's personalities correspond to the way they are inside. So we're going to look at, one, the definition of the self, and two, a couple of theories about behavior to see how people act and how what they do corresponds to how they feel and how they think. So first, there are a lot of different definitions of the self in psychology. Some people don't even think there is a self. But this definition, as per contemporary psychology, states that the self, as you can see, is a center of personality, the organizer of our thoughts, feelings, and actions. So this self right here, is a unique manifestation of everything that we've grown up with. It's a unique manifestation of our environment, of our biology, and the way we've grown up, the way we've been brought up. So this self is represented only by us. The way we behave conveys information about ourselves. So now let's look at personality. So we know what the self is. Now we have to see how people act and why they do it. There are four main theories in psychology that exist today to try and explain this. There are a lot of other theories besides these four, but what we found is that these theories are basically kind of combinations of these and just simplifications of what they are. So these four theories are the psychoanalytic theory, the humanistic theory, the traits theory, and the social cognitive theory. So in this talk, we're just going to go through each one of these and try and connect them to examples so people can see why people behave as per these theories. So first is the psychoanalytic theory of behavior. So some of you may know what this is. I don't know if a lot of you do, but this is a Rorschach diagram, a Rorschach ink plot. So a lot of people who are Freudian psychologists, people who are psychoanalytic psychologists, use these kind of diagrams to try and diagnose patients. What they do is they have a little packet of these ink blots, and they page through it, and they ask their patients to look at it and tell them what they see in this image. So right away when I see this, I kind of see like a skull-shaped figure thing. And a lot of times what these physicians do is that they base their judgments of their patient's mental health on how the patients interpret these ink blots. So a lot of this goes by the psychoanalytic theory. The psychoanalytic theory of behavior states that the small things you do, the slip-ups you say, and the things you see in images kind of show your inner thoughts and feelings. So psychoanalytics was discovered mostly by Freud, Sigmund Freud, and he basically said that there is kind of a conflict between three different states of your mind, the id, the ego, and the superego. So a lot of you probably know this, you've probably heard it before. So the id is essentially our primal instincts, our desire to survive, our desire to live, that kind of thing. Then on top of that, we have the ego and the superego. So what the ego looks at is our long-term success. The ego wants to maximize the ability for us to feel long-term success, and it's realistic, it's practical. Here's a diagram real quick. Yeah, and on top of that, we have the superego. Now what the superego is our values and our morals that we've gained from growing up, from our community, and the way we've been brought up. So a lot of times when we're in a situation, the way we behave is influenced by the interaction of these three items. So a really good example is the Saw horror movies. A fun fact, a lot of the times the main character in the Saw horror movies was supposed to be a play on the founder of psychoanalytic theory. So anyway, the serial killer, basically what he did was that he put people in situations where they had to do things that was really against their morals to survive. So one example is take a guy, put him in chains, and the only way he could survive is if he killed another person. So obviously, the guy's morals say that he doesn't want to kill the person. Killing the person is against his superego. At the same time, if the guy kills the person, it's against his ego because you can't live a long, happy life knowing that you killed someone, having that on your conscience. But at the same time, his id, his primal instinct to survive, his basic instinct to want to live, overtakes everything, and he kills the person. So this is what the psychoanalytic theory says. It says that the basic primal instinct to survive outlaws the ego and the superego. This is what Freud thought. So now we also look at the humanistic theory of behavior. So amongst the 4 theories of behavior, this one's pretty interesting. What it says is that most people, when they behave, want to behave in a way that can help them attain a certain ideal they have of themselves. So this is kind of hard to explain, but basically, there's this famous person, famous psychologist, Abraham Maslow, yeah. So Maslow found out this theory of humanistic, he found out one part of the theory of humanistic behavior. And what he said was that there's a theory called self-actualization. So what self-actualization is that a mature person, a mature adult with goals and desires just like all of us here, a mature adult wants to self-actualize. In the future, they want to act in a way so that their behavior becomes the way they want it to. So once your basic needs are fulfilled, once you have food, once you have a shelter and all that kind of things, you essentially progress up this pyramid trying to fulfill each one of those different stages. So we'll take this example as, if you were in a group of friends and one of your friends says something that insults you and you get angry and you walk off. The way that corresponds to this theory of behavior is that you wanted to have an ideal image of your self-esteem. You want to keep your self-esteem high. So what your friend said to you made you angry, and it was going against your self-esteem. So therefore, you got angry as a result of that. You're corresponding with the humanistic theory of behavior. So a lot of issues with the humanistic theory is that a lot of psychologists find that it doesn't look into the fact that humans are evil too. It's too optimistic. So now we also have the traits theory of behavior, when people behave based on traits. Essentially, some of you may have seen this too, the Myers-Briggs personality test, taken some of those online, and lots of different personality tests, basically looking to quantize individual traits that make up a person. A lot of people have problems with this because they can't see the fact that sometimes individuals can be made of simply traits, that individuals can be made of simple characteristics. But with the traits theory of behavior, what people are trying to do is find different scales, for example, like rate your happiness from 1 to 10, that kind of thing, different scales relating to different aspects of your personality. And they want to see if these different aspects correspond to something. A lot of times, psychologists use this thing called factor analysis. What they do is they find a bunch of ways that people feel. A lot of times, certain people, they find people who are positive tend to be happy, people who are positive tend to, people who are positive tend to like fun, that kind of thing. So they take a bunch of characteristics that correspond to one thing, they clump them together. So these different clumps help people tell why people behave the way they do, because if someone has a certain characteristic, they're likely to have these other ones as well. So you also have the social cognitive theory, and I'm kind of tired of all these big words now, but the social cognitive theory looks at the fact that, 1, your behavior is mostly influenced by your environment. 2, the way your environment influences you influences how you respond to the environment. And 3, your biology, your cognitive behavior, like basically your biological function. So the social cognitive theory says that the way you behave is because you learn from the people around you, and what you learn from the people around you then influences how you respond to things. For example, if I grow up in an area where I feel a lot of pressure and I get nervous a lot, I'll get nervous really easily, and then when I come to a situation like a TED Talk that is very nerve-wracking, I get nervous. So the way I was born, the way I grew up, and the way I was brought up, then influences the way I respond to other situations. So what does this all mean? All these different theories, all these different definitions of selves. Well, overall, let's look at everything from a broader perspective. I first asked this question because I wanted to know, why do people act the way they do? Why do people do things, and why do people feel differently than the way they do things? So these 4 theories seek to explain how to connect the self to the way you behave. Again, let's look at them real quick. Psychoanalytic theory says that you have a deep primal instinct and that outlaws everything else. Humanistic theory says that you want to work towards an ideal version of yourself. And the traits theory says that you're made up of a bunch of different traits, like personality tests, those kinds of traits. And also, we have the social cognitive theory, which looks at the point of you interacting with your environment and building yourself based on that. So all of this means that how do you connect this to your life? How do you leave this talk with something interesting. I think it's really important to realize that behavior is dynamic and behavior is cumulative. So a lot of times when someone does something you don't like and someone doesn't act the way you do, I think it's important for you to realize that there's a lot of things you can learn from that. There's a lot of ways you can look at someone who doesn't act in a way that you like and learn things about them. You can learn why they're acting so angry all the time, why certain things tend to disturb them, things like that. You can learn something about that person, and you can become closer. I think understanding that personality is based on a lot of different parts of your behavior and of yourself can help people understand each other more. And also, I think this is really important because I am a firm believer in the importance of self-reflection. And if you guys now know some theories of why people think, you know that when you act a certain way, it kind of reflects on you, it kind of reflects what you think. So if you take a second and think about the things you've done and how they correspond to what you do, you can try and reflect on yourself and hopefully become a better person. All right, thank you.
Anyone have questions for Kavish?